what? One of the joys of life that I'm really not enjoying at this point is being on the outskirts of a major city and having no phone reception and the inability to stream. I spent 3 minutes streaming and 5 minutes reconnecting. So I just pulled over, started over again. Wow. I'm not in a ravine. I'm not in a ditch. I'm not in the middle of nowhere. I can literally see Houston from here. I can't get phone reception. Is that a compliment? Don't put me stickers. Let me see if I get anybody to come back. Oh, jeez. Yeah, I can come back on this one. Willis, we're going to be I got one. Hey, yeah, I can see Houston from here, but apparently I can stream. I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And I had that last stream going, and it decided to go to reconnecting for about 3 or 4 minutes. So then I have to close it and start over again. And I lost everybody, and now I have one person back. Thank you. That is maddeningly frustrating when it does that because it never comes back. Hello. I'm sorry, I was streaming and then it says reconnecting and it just sits there and says reconnecting for 3, 4 minutes and everybody goes away. That now if I was in the middle of nowhere, I would understand that, but I'm not in the middle of nowhere. Anyways, talking about corruption, one other example I had was a Houston city government. There was a woman who had 2 degrees. One was business, and what are you doing? What am I doing, Amy? I am driving from Houston to the outskirts of Tulsa. I have a load on board, and I am shooting up I-45 here in Texas right now. I stay over here in the right lane, and I go 62 because my gas mileage is really good in this van, comparatively speaking. So I kind of stay at everybody's way. But like I said, I was talking about just corruption in general, and this woman worked in for the city of Houston, and she was there operating with 2 college degrees. One was like a business degree, and one was a law degree. I don't know if it was a self-appointed job, but one of the things she did is she would dig through the records of city employees who fluff up the resume, which is perfectly normal. People do that, but people would fake a degree. Say, "Oh, I went to college for 1 semester," and then they are a part of a semester, and then they turn around and go, "Yeah, I got a degree," and fill in the blank. And then they print out a fake diploma and say, "See," and then you start digging around, and there's no transcripts to go with it. So, and that's unfortunate. A lot of people do that. And this woman was exposing people who were doing that and getting them fired from their jobs. And then she would, quote, vet somebody else. And of course, the people she was vetting were her friends. Lo and behold, this woman didn't have 2 college degrees. She didn't have 1 college degree. She didn't have a high school diploma. And all the people she was vetting were her friends, none of whom had college degrees. So it was just a big corruption cycle, and she got criminally charged for this. And I remember because she went on TV and played the victim. It was a couple years ago here, and played the victim big time. Not me. I'm special. I shouldn't be held accountable for my actions. One of them deals. And one other, and it's government agency, but one other situation that where corruption runs amok is in law enforcement, and it's not what you think. The corruption you would expect is there, but the biggest thing that goes on in law enforcement is timesheets. They lie about overtime. That's a real common problem because they get paid outrageous overtime, and you can dig online into a city and find out how much they salary or how much they pay their police actively, and then you look at how much money they made, for the year, and it's usually double whatever their proposed out. They got an $80,000 salary, and they made 150, 160 grand. You have to scratch your head. It has to do with overtime. What's the price of meth in your city? I can't even tell you the price of cigarettes or beer. How would I, how am I supposed to know that? And timesheet, they give themselves overtime they don't actually work, and it's real common. My son was a police officer. He lasted 9 months and got out of it. He said, I'm not playing the games they play. He wasn't impressed. And this has happened in a lot of different areas in the United States. But a few years ago in Louisiana, a local news channel did an expose on the police departments. They did a record search and found the highest paid street cop in the state. It was a guy making $200,000 a year as a street cop. They said, okay, let's see what this guy does. And they got his records, and he was put in overtime. I mean, this guy was on the clock 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they went on ahead and said, okay, let's see what this guy does with his 16 hours. And they followed him for like 2 weeks, and they found out where he lived, and they were parked down the street watching. And sure enough, 6 o'clock in the morning, he goes on the clock. They're waiting for him to come outside, and he doesn't. He's just on the clock. Well, about 10:30, he comes wandering out of his house, gets in his patrol car. He drives down the street to a little choking puke restaurant. He goes in, and he sits there and eats brunch and hangs out. He's playing on his phone and reading something, and they sit there watching. At about 1:30 in the afternoon, he leaves, and he drives out to some little 2-lane road out in the country, pulls into a parking lot by a business, and they drive by, and they go down the ways trying to watch. The very first car that drives by, he pulls over. They're watching him, and he's there for a few minutes. He gets done, writes the guy a ticket for, they don't know at the time what it was, and then he goes back to the same place. The very next car that goes by, he pulls out and pulls him over, writes him a ticket, goes back, and he does this 3 times. At the end of the third, he drives home. So he's there an hour, maybe, and he goes home and they watch him. And he doesn't leave his house. It's, 3 o'clock. And he stays on the clock until 10 o'clock at night. And he calls and puts himself on the clock. And this went on for 2.5, 3 weeks. He varied it up. He went to different places. One was a church parking lot, but the same routine. He would stop the first 3 cars that went by, and then he'd go home. And there he was writing tickets, those tickets that you can't prove or disprove, like a failure to maintain lane. Yeah, long time no see. Hey, Sam, what's up? Yeah, Sam, I'm sorry. I got stuck at home. I was supposed to be out here on the clock for like 6 weeks. And at the 3-week mark, my suspension in the front end of my van started making a racket. And every time I hit a bump, it sounded like the whole van was coming apart. So I had to order some struts. I got a load to Missouri, dropped and drove home, deadheaded home, waited for the struts to show up, had them installed, went to the little shop the guys I hang with, and it was a nightmare getting the struts put in, and they're just bolt-ons, which is weird. But we got the struts put in, had the van aligned. Last Sunday night, I put myself back on the board, and they literally didn't get me a load until Friday, this last Friday. 2 days ago. And right at rush hour, I had to go 45 miles through Houston and 45 miles back. Sucks through Houston to pick up my load. And now I'm heading north of 45 towards Tulsa. And I got to drop this at like 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm just going to mosey up there tonight. But yeah, I've been home for 2 weeks, which this job, you can't really take 2 weeks off in a row, but I did. Wasn't my fault, but I did. So now I'm heading back up here, going down the road. And I was I'm talking about corruption, widespread corruption. And like I said, this guy in Louisiana, for 2.5, 3 weeks, this guy did the same thing, and he was getting paid 16 hours a day for doing about an hour's worth of work, and it made it out in the media. They did the expose on the news about it. Of course, the government, police, the government acted surprised, but there was a whole bunch of guys doing the same thing, and that's not uncommon. It goes on, a little here, a little there, not necessarily a 16-hour day, 7-day a week thing, but that kind of timesheet corruption is real common. That's the thing they do. I was thinking, there's also the human traffic light scam that goes on. And I don't know if this happens all over the country, but in Texas and Louisiana, you'll see this a lot. Vehicle culture and bike culture. It's far better than India. You can modify as you wish, but not here. Yeah, I know what you mean about, you mean like street legal? Was that what you're talking about, Sam? Yeah, the corruption is absolutely ridiculous. The police do this thing down again. This I don't know how widespread this is, but in Texas and Louisiana, they do this thing called the human traffic light, where a private company will hire a police officer and pay them $40 an hour to show up in their police uniform. And at the end of a business day, you have a big factory with 500 employees, and they all walk out the door, get in the cars, wait for traffic. The human traffic lights walk out in the street with their police uniforms on and put up traffic cones and block the entire road so that company can have VIP traffic treatment. So I don't care what the traffic light says, but I'm wielding my police powers for a private company. And that is completely illegal and corruption up one side and down the other. And they get away with it because they don't hold themselves accountable. So that's a little side gig. About 25 years ago, when I first started flying offshore, I was at a guy's house. So this is south of Houston in a little bitty town. And they were having a party at the house, and I didn't really know anybody there except the guy I was hanging out with at the time, a friend of mine. And at the end of I don't drink. I'm not a drinker, never have been one. But there was alcohol flying around. And this one guy picks up the phone and he said, "I'm going to go ahead and make the call." And they're like, okay. And he got on. He's like, yeah. And he read off what turns out to be a license plate number. He's like, blue Honda, license plate number, blah, blah, blah. Then he hands the phone to the next guy and he says, gray Ford pickup, license plate number. And they're just handing the phone to each person. They're doing it. And I said, what are they, what's this? And he goes, oh, these guys are all sheriff's deputies. I went, and they're calling the dispatcher when somebody calls them in drunk driving. They know it's them and they won't respond to it. And there were like 10 of these guys that did that in a row. I'm like, wow, ain't you special? You call in your drunk driving in advance and it's legal. Anyway, that was the stuff that I had kind of a personal contact with, which brings me to the big storyline. And feel free to look this one up. Their name was Tuttle, Tuttle. It's called you can find it online. It's probably on Wikipedia at this point, but it's called the Tuttle Raid or the Tuttle Murders. Here's the storyline the police had. They had information that a couple in a neighborhood on the south side of Houston, an older neighborhood, a little worn down, houses built in the 40s and 50s, like 1,000 square foot homes, kind of like I said, older neighborhood, kind of past its prime. There was a couple living in a house that were selling heroin out of their house. And they talked to there's a drug task force in Houston that kind of got this green light to do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. They're very violent. They do no-knock raids. And there's been complaint after complaint after complaint filed against them because they blow down doors and attack people. They either have the wrong house or there's nothing there. They're just a very violent operation, and the system just turns a blind eye to their tactics. But all they do are no-knock raids. Well, the Tuttle raid, which happened in 2019, was based on the leader of the Drug Task Force. It was a guy with the last name of Goines, Goines. You could look him up too. Goines went in front of a judge and said, I've had two confidential informants tell me that this married couple, are selling heroin out of their house. And they're armed to the teeth. The homeowner, the guy, wears a 357 on his hip at all times and tells every single person he sells his heroin to that if they try to rob him, or if somebody tries to rob him, or the police show up, that they're not going to make it out of there alive because he's a crack shot and blah 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 blah. He's very violent, and they've got lots of guns and all the usual stuff, right? Let's see here, awesome. Hi, what's up, Universal? That's cool. So they give him the judge sign based on this statement. The judge signs a warrant, and they do a no-knock raid. They go there with their goon squad. They send a group of guys around the back and a group of guys from the front. And again, here's the story. They kick the door down. Wyatt Earp, the guy with the 357, whips out his gun and shoots the cop coming through the door. And then I guess he shoots trick shots over his shoulder and shoots the cops coming in the back door. Ends up shooting 5 police officers with his 9mm. Wow, that truck barely missed touching you. yeah, there's not a lot of clearance. You know, it's interesting. They raise the roads, but they never raise the bridges when they repair. But this guy, Wyatt Earp, the homeowner, shoots the cops coming in the front and, I don't know, spins his handgun over his shoulder and shoots cops coming in the back door. The guy's wife, who's also a homicidal maniac, jumps off the couch and wrestles a gun away from one of the heroes on the ground that's been shot, and they have to engage her. The police fall back on both sides after they ventilated the two homeowners, and they take up a defensive position outside, and the people inside cry out for help. And of course, since they're homicidal maniacs, they don't want that happening, so they let them bleed out and die. And then the police go in and inspect, the wreckage afterwards. The 5 police officers that get shot get hauled off in an ambulance. And it was all over the news. And, they're heroes saving us from all the bad people. And here they are in their hospital beds. You give them the thumbs up because they survived the surgery. And, these crazy people, that started shooting at these, wonderful police officers. And, everybody's getting awards and the usual garbage you see. Well, they go in and check out the crime scene, and there are no drugs in the house. But it doesn't matter at this point because they're homicidal maniacs, and they shot these, police officers, and it's all their fault. And then almost immediately, there were YouTubers, actually. Houston area YouTubers went and filmed the house, and they boarded up the house real quick. So again, it's like 800 square foot. It's a real small house. And the YouTubers started filming the house. There was one guy, I think he's around anymore. He walked around and he said, "Boy, this doesn't look right. Is this what I'm looking at? Doesn't look right." So immediately, police cover-up started, and the police went back to the house, peeled the boards off and the crime scene tape, went into the house and destroyed the house. They didn't want anybody else looking at the evidence. And then a few months later, it had to go through the courts to get permission to go look at the house themselves. The homeowner sent in a private investigator, and he looked around. He said, "That's not what happened here." Now, this raid happened in 2019, and it took until 2024 for the story to come out complete. So you've heard the police version of what happened. Here's what actually happened. These people had a next door neighbor. The woman who lived in the house next door to them put an air conditioner, a window air conditioner unit in their house. And on the side of the Tuttle's home, it was a side that had no windows, and there were like waist-high beads. And this person knew they had an outlet over there, so this woman just conveniently ran her cord over their fence and plugged into their house and let them pay her electric bill. That kind of mentality. Well, the Tuttles found it, unplugged it, and threw it back over the fence. So the woman called her, she was one of the side chicks of the guy Goines, called and said, "Hey, look what these people did. You need to take care of this." And he said, "Oh, I'll fix them." So he goes into court and says, "I have these two affidavits from two of my confidential informants, like I said, that said we have drugs." And it turns out the first confidential informant doesn't know what they're talking about, and the second one was a figment of his imagination. So these people literally were doing nothing illegal. So the police blow down the front door and they shoot their dog, because every dog is a vicious dog, and they showed a picture. The dog was just a little ankle biter. So when the police blew the front door down, the dog was in the living room and looked at him, and they shot the dog. The police coming in the back door heard the gunfire and thought they were getting shot at. So they started shooting through the house, hitting the police coming in the front door. The police coming in the front door started shooting through the house and hitting the police coming through the back door. The police on the side of the house, where there were no windows, started shooting through the walls because there was gunfire going on in the house, and they just didn't shoot the ends, they just shot in the middle. And the homeowners are between 3 sets of guns firing through the house. When the private investigator went through the house after they destroyed the crime scene, he flipped the couch over and found a bullet. There's a cop. Hold on a sec here. What marker it says? Stand by when I got to call this one out. When the guy turned hold on, I got to read the mile marker here. And we got Highway Patrol marker 121 watching southbound. Anyway, they turned the couch over. They found a bullet lodged in the couch, and the bullet had DNA from the wife, proving she was sitting on the couch when she was shot. She wasn't jumping up and trying to grab somebody's gun. Both people were shot full of holes and died within a few minutes. They went through the entire house. Not only was there not a single bullet hole from a 357, there wasn't a single. They never found a handgun. Period. It didn't exist. So this was all just a big lie. So then they bring drug dogs in. The drug dogs run around the house. They don't find anything and they leave. Well, unfortunately for Goins, when the drug dog left the house, it went straight to his car, which had the door wide open. And since he was in the hospital with a bullet hole, so it just says, went into his patrol car and started scratching at the armrest, and there was a bag of heroin in the armrest. Not checked out from the evidence room for a buy, but, just in case you need it when you kick down somebody's door and there's no drugs to be found, you bring your own. Police tactics. And that quickly came out. This took 5 years to come to the surface. And when it finally did, that guy went to trial. First of all, you can always tell there's something going on because the police will either retire or resign. And that somehow is their get out of jail free card. I don't know how that works. Well, this guy instantly retired. They go, oh, he retired. Like that's going to wash away the murders he just committed. Well, they took him to trial, and of course he played the cop card of, it's the heat of the moment, and it's not my fault, and I'm going to hide behind my badge, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he got convicted. I think he got 60 years. And that just happened, which is a rare victory against that. So then the police had to start looking at themselves critically, realizing that just because you have the magic badge and a costume doesn't mean you're honest. And that's ridiculous. And I was just watching the news yesterday, and it was like a chief of police in New Jersey that was shaking down those CBD places. Absolutely ridiculous. But it took them 5 years to sort that one out, that killing. But corruption in this business, and corruption it's around us everywhere, and it sucks. Why can't you just do what you say and say what you do? I used to work with a clown. Helicopters run on jet fuel. And jet fuel is basically, it literally says on the receipt, ultra low sulfur diesel. It's just extremely expensive diesel fuel, missing some of the lubricants. And you can literally take jet fuel and put it in your diesel vehicle. It'll run on it. It's just really expensive, but it'll run on it. And we used to work with a guy who drove a 1 ton or a 3/4 ton truck, diesel, to drive back and forth to work. Which, why? It's just you and your car. Everybody else drives an Econo box. And this guy would drive out on the flight line at night thinking nobody saw him, and he would grab the refuel hose and put 80, 90 gallons of jet fuel into his big tank behind the bed. just to drive himself back and forth to work. I mean, absolutely, he got caught, but it's ridiculous. Such mess. Manipulation happens everywhere. There, I'm trying to read and drive here. Must be some generalized actions. Yeah, when you get in public office and you get into an elected position, you kind of put yourself beyond the law. My my introduction to politics, I was about 10. My dad was an airline pilot until 2000, I think he stopped. He was an airline pilot. He bounced around. He would rent houses in different cities for different periods of time. And at one point, he lived in this beautiful house that was in Salt Lake City, up above the Capitol building. He drove up the hill. I was 10. The road that he drove on literally drove right up to the staircase of the Capitol, and then you would follow the parking lot around and then continue up the hill into some area. And I asked my dad, "What is that?" He goes, "Oh, that's the state Capitol building." So what goes on there? He said, "That's where a bunch of people sit around and argue and yell and throw insults and vote themselves a raise." I went, "Oh, okay." That's interesting. Hey, yeah, that's what they do. Here's a little side. You want to see more corruption? Senators in Congress. You serve, what, 4 years or 6 years? One or the other? If you serve one term in Congress, and I won't type anything out. Thanks. If you serve a term in Congress and you get voted out or you retire or whatever, you keep that paycheck for the rest of your life. How's that for a retirement plan? You get that $175 paycheck for the rest of your life. Your Congress, Senate, doesn't matter. You serve one term, you get that paycheck forever. Oh, and by the way, they don't pay into Social Security. Those people, they know it's a scam, so they don't pay into it. They don't get any of that money taken out of their check. They get a full retirement out of the, quote, general fund. They know it's a scam. And they all get up there on stage and they all yell and scream and bang the podium and, oh, you're this, you're that. They're all the same team. They all do the same garbage. I don't care what party you're in. They're all lining their pockets. And this is spitting off topic a little bit. This certain percentage of people that have this absolute hatred for Trump, it's not just because of who he is, it's how he got there is the problem. I honestly believe that people get into politics, same with law enforcement. I think people actually go in there with pure intentions. But once you're there for a while, you start getting exposed to how things are actually done. And they tell you, here's how we do it. And the only way you're going to get power is to be on a committee. And the only way you're going to be on a committee is if you play ball with us. So you either jump in line and do what we tell you, or you're going to be toothless and then you're going to get voted out. If you work your way up the food chain, let's say you're a congressman and you get enough power and you get enough compromise, you want to run for higher office, and all of a sudden you're working your way to the White House. Well, by the time you get to where you could run for president, you have sold your soul to so many people, to so many entities that there's nothing left of you. You've sold out. You had to. Let's just say, yeah, you've completely sold yourself out. And you can be manipulated and controlled. You say, well, I'm going to, go do this. You can't do this unless you have that power, which was given to you by somebody else. And then there's Trump, who didn't go through the process, who doesn't owe a bunch of different people anything. And so how do you manipulate and control what he's doing if he doesn't owe you anything? That's why I think there's the system in general doesn't like him, is he doesn't play by their rules. And that's why they're mad at him. He's treating the United States like a business, and that's just not how the government really operates. And that causes problems. What time is